High and low tides. Because the moon is close to the Earth, there are interactions between the Earth and the moon. One visible interaction is the effect of the gravitational pull of the moon on the Earth. This pull results in the rise and fall of the ocean level as the moon moves in its orbit around the Earth. The rise and fall of the oceans are called tides. Use figure 1 to answer questions 1 and 2. In figure 1, we see the Earth here spinning counterclockwise as we look down from the North Pole. Moon's gravitational pull pulls on the Earth. The Earth's hydrosphere is affected by the pull of the moon, causing it to bulge in between the moon and the Earth, position D, and also causing it to bulge at position B. Let's label where the high tides would be. On the diagram, let's label where the low tides would be. If an observer was at position D, they would experience high tide. It would take about 24 hours for them to return to their position at location D, and as they do, they would experience a low tide, a high tide, a low tide, and then back to high tide. Since it takes 24 hours for the Earth to go around one full time, that would mean during the course of 24 hours they would experience 2 high tides and 2 low tides. The difference in time between the high and the low tide would be about 6 hours. Between this low tide and this high tide would be another 6 hours. Between this high tide and this low tide would be another 6 hours. And between this low tide and this high tide would be another 6 hours. Now, it's not exactly 6 hours because as the Earth is spinning, the moon is also revolving around the Earth. So it's a little bit, so the time is not exactly 6 hours. However, for the sake of this lesson, to keep the math simple, let's break down each position into 6-hour intervals. Now, taking a look at the question, which side of the Earth is facing the moon? That would be position D. Which sides of the Earth are having low tide? That would be position A and C. And which are having high tide? That would be positions D and B. Now in the next diagram, we see that position D has moved from here to here. As we noted in the first diagram, to get to this spot right here to this spot would take 6 hours. Looking at the questions for figure 2, which sides of the Earth are having the low tide? That would be the same place we saw low tide before. Here's the moon, here's where your high tides are, and also on the opposite side of the Earth. But the low tides would be at positions B, D now, and the high tide would be at positions A and C. And we noted that to get from this spot right here to this spot would take about 6 hours. Using figure number 3. On the diagram now, we have low tide here still, high tide here still, and high tide here. But as we can see, position D has now moved from here to here. That would take another 6 hours. The position on the Earth having the high tide would be B and D, and the low tide positions would be A and C. And the amount of time passed between these two diagrams would be another 6 hours. Spring and neap tides. Now before we take a look at the sheet here, one thing to mention to you is that not only is the moon's gravitational pull pulling on the Earth, but also the sun's gravitational pull is pulling on the Earth. And because of the 2 gravitational pulls on the Earth simultaneously, this can have an effect on how high the tide is at high tide and how low it is at low tide. Spring tide. When the moon is at its full and new phases, the Earth has higher high tides and lower low tides than at other times. These tides are called spring tides, and they occur twice a month when the sun and the moon line up with the Earth. The increased effect of the sun's gravity on Earth causes ocean bulges to become larger. Figure 1, new moon. When the moon is in a position in between the sunlight's direction and the Earth, the moon is in its new moon phase. During the new moon phase, the sun and the moon's gravitational pull work together. Because they're both in the same direction, the high tides are higher on both sides, and with more water being pulled for the high tides, the low tides are lower. During the full moon, the moon is in a position opposite to the sunlight's direction on the opposite side of the Earth. So the sun is pulling on the Earth in one direction and the moon's pulling in another direction. Now these diagrams are opposite as far as where the sun is, but here we can see that we would have a full moon position right here, as an observer on Earth would see the whole lit side of the moon. Now, the moon is pulling the water in this direction while the sun is pulling in this direction. And because they are pulling the ocean in opposite directions, the ocean on this side is pulled by the moon, the ocean on this side is pulled by the sun, resulting in higher high tides and lower low tides. So when are the sun, moon, and Earth in line? During the new and the full moon period. Number 2, what happens to the pull of gravity on the Earth when the sun, Earth, and moon are in a line? The sun and moon's gravitational pull work together to increase the pull of gravity on the Earth. And what are these unusually high and low tides called? These are known as spring tides. How often do the unusually high and low tides occur? These high and low tides are going to occur during the new moon and full moon phase. And since it takes about a month for the moon to go from new moon back to new moon, we'll have these unusually high and low tides twice a month. At which moon phases do spring tides take place? Here during the new and the full moon. Neap tides. During the first and last quarter phases, the moon's gravitational pull on the ocean is partially canceled out by the sun's gravitational pull. This results in tides that are not very high and not very low. These tides are called neap tides, and they occur twice a month. In diagram number 1 and in diagram number 2, we see that during the first quarter and last quarter moons, that the moon is pulling on the Earth in this direction. In the first quarter moon phase and last quarter moon phase, we see that the sun is pulling in this direction and the moon is pulling in this direction. And the results for these phases are going to be that when the moon and the sun are in right angles to each other, they're actually going to be working against each other. So the moon is going to try to pull up the Earth's tide, and the sun's going to be trying to pull up the Earth's ocean. So the moon and the sun are working against each other. So when are the moon and sun at right angles? During the first quarter and last quarter moon. And what happens to the pull of gravity when the sun and moon are in right angles is they work against each other. What kind of tides occur when the moon and sun are at right angles? Well, those tides are going to be tides that are not very high and not very low. And what are tides that are not very high and not very low called? We call those neap tide. How often does this occur? Well, since it takes 1 month for the moon to make its way all the way around, and during that month we would have one first quarter and one last quarter, that would be twice a month. And at what moon phases do these tides take place? They take place during the first quarter moon and the last quarter moon. Quick review on tides. Tides occur because of the gravitational pull of the moon and the sun. There are 2 high tides and 2 low tides a day. Spring tides occur when the Earth, sun, and moon are lined up, causing higher than normal tides. And spring tides occur only during the new and full moon phases. So here we see that. And then we have neap tides occur only in the first and last quarter phases. And here's the thing about tides. They are cyclic and predictable because we can pretty much predict that about 6 hours after a high tide, there's going to be a low tide. And about 6 hours after that, you're going to experience another high tide again. All right. Good luck with your homework. Thank you so much.